NPC session. Let's cross live to our reporter Zhou Yun in Beijing. She's at the Great Hall of the People right now. Hello, Zhou Yun. Tell us more about today's agenda.
Hello there, Pandang. Well, the key posts that will be decided today, such as the Premier, the Vice Chairman of the Central Military Commission, President of the Supreme People's Court, etc., are all nominated by President Xi Jinping based on the consultations among all the delegations. The deputies will vote on each candidate, and a majority vote are needed for the final approval. As for the responsibilities of the Premier, he or she is the highest administrative position in the State Council, which carries out the practice based on the decisions made in here by the National People's Congress, and as well as the day-to-day running of the departments and ministries. And the Premier assumed the overall responsibilities for the work of the State Council, and one of the Premier's responsibilities that the public are usually most familiar with is drawing up and implementing the plan for the national economic and social development and the state budget. Or in other words, the Premier is always seen as the one of the sole figures to outline the country's economy. And in the past 5 years, China has emerged as the second largest economy in the world, and over 15 reform measures has been carried out by the government. And now the country is expected as a crucial time to further improve the quality and efficiency of the growth. Meanwhile, a number of the issues are yet to be solved, such as stabilizing the financial sector and real estate sector, improving healthcare system, and also keep fighting against corruption and environmental protection. Now, all these thorny issues are awaited to be solved and addressed by the leadership in the years ahead. Back to you, Pandang.
Thank you very much, our reporter Zhou Yun at Great Hall of the People in Beijing. The first session of the 13th National People's Congress held its fifth plenary session on Saturday. Lawmakers voted on an institutional restructuring plan of the State Council and a draft election method. With the election of leaders of the state, military and legislature, China has finished the most important part of a government reshuffle. Now let's take a look back at a historical moment.
习近平同志当选为中华人民共和国主席。习近平同志当选为中华人民共和国中央军事委员会主席。
Li Zhanshu has been elected 13th NPC Standing Committee Chairman. Wang Qishan has been elected Vice President of the PRC. The Vice Chairpersons and Secretary General of the top legislature were also elected. Swearing solemnly to the country and its people, Xi and his colleagues took an oath of allegiance to the Constitution.
我宣誓，忠于中华人民共和国宪法，维护宪法权威，履行法定职责，忠于祖国，忠于人民，恪尽职守，廉洁奉公，接受人民监督。 为建设富强、民主、文明、和谐、美丽的社会主义现代化强国努力奋斗。宣誓人：习近平。
This marked the historic moment that state leaders took an oath of allegiance to the Constitution for the first time. It is considered to be China's biggest government reshuffle in years, in which the State Council will have 15 fewer entities at ministerial or vice-ministerial levels. In the coming days, the NPC will elect the Premier of the State Council, the new head of the National Supervisory Commission, and other ministers. From institutional restructuring to economic growth and improving people's livelihood, the new government will certainly face challenges ahead.
Leaders from around the world sent their congratulations on the election of Xi Jinping as President of China.
Russian President Vladimir Putin said the result of the vote is a recognition of Xi's contributions to China's rapid economic and social development, as well as protecting China's interests. Pakistani President Mahmoud Hussein said the election manifests Chinese people's confidence in Xi's leadership. The remarkable development achieved in the past 5 years has upgraded China's international status and image and greatly changed people's lives. South Korean President Moon Jae-in wished China to realize its Chinese dream with Xi's administration and make greater contributions to peace and development of Northeast Asia and the world. Emperor Akihito of Japan also congratulated Xi's election, and the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe called for improved bilateral ties. Cameroon's President Paul Biya looked forward to strengthening the special friendly and cooperative relations with China. And Namibia's President Hage Geingob praised China's remarkable achievements and rapid social and economic development under Xi's leadership, adding that China has embarked on a journey of building a strong, prosperous, democratic, culturally advanced, and harmonious socialist country. Austrian President Alexander Van der Bellen said China would become more successful under Xi's leadership. And Serbia's President Alexander Vučić said China would realize a great rejuvenation, helping maintain peace and stability in the world.
China's political season is being reported by prominent media outlets across Asia. Let's take a look at what some of them are saying.
Pakistan's Independent News quoted Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi referring to Xi Jinping as the chief architect of China's major country diplomacy policy, and how the Chinese president was personally involved in much of the work. In Nepal, the Kathmandu Post alluded to something said by a former leader of China's top political advisory body. Yu Zhengsheng said in China's new era, the CPPCC would closely unite around the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China, with Xi Jinping as its core. He added that the body would stay committed to making recommendations on how to deepen reform. In Cambodia, the Khmer Times said the Belt and Road Initiative was focused on connectivity and cooperation between Eurasian nations, with China at the center of a massive trade network. And the Philippine news agency quotes the Chinese premier, who said China had opened its doors wider to the world, how it was now driving its own development harder, as well as creating more opportunities for the rest of the world.
During the course of the two sessions, President Xi Jinping has been taking part in deliberations and talking with members of the CPPCC Central Committee and delegates from the military. He listened to their suggestions and ideas and gave his thoughts on how to address their major concerns. Here are some of his words.
既要下决心消除绝对贫困，又不能把胃口吊得太高，使大家期望值太高，力不从心，小马拉大车，你拉不动，你拉不动的结果是好心没办成好事儿。创新太重要了。中国如果不走创新驱动的道路，新旧动能不能够顺利转换，转换是一个坎儿。如果不能顺利转换，我们也不可能真正的强大起来。强起来就是靠创新，创新又靠人才。共产党就是追求人民的幸福生活。什么地方人民感觉到不幸福、不快乐、不满意，我们就在哪方面下功夫，排忧解难。
谢人民爱
要做那些显际的工作，也要做那些潜际的工作，既要做那些立竿见影的工作也要做那些为后人做铺垫的打基础的工作在这个方面呢，就不计较个人的功名功成名就这个意思。我们追求的一个是人民群众的好口碑，一个是日后历史沉淀之后的那个真正的评价。中国它的社会主义的大厦是需要这个四梁八柱和这个基础党它是贯穿在这里边的一个总的骨架。这个上面有党中央我们说这个顶梁柱，但是我们还有一个非常重要的，就是我们的基础。基础呢，那就是在我们这个各个基层党组，基础不牢，地动山摇。现在你们的工作就是这上面千条线，下面一根针的所以我们的工作必须是夯实基层这个要有千千万万的基层的这种骨干，结合实际的去做各种工作。我就想部队还是要练的。你如果不采取真正的实战化的练兵不加强这种练兵的这种力度，那你无法消除和平敌人。当然，现在它是要与时俱进的，说时刻准备着真戈待旦，弘扬我军的这个优良传统就是我们讲的，仗怎么打就怎么练，从上到下都怎么练士兵怎么练，各军兵种怎么练指挥官怎么练，对我们强军有好处谁是最可爱的人？不要让英雄既流血又流泪让军人呢受到尊崇这是最基本的这个要保障。
For more insight into China's political season, let's talk to Mr. Victor Kaujikai and Mr. Ainan Tagan. Gentlemen, I'd like to start with today's agenda. As our reporter Zoe just mentioned earlier, NPC deputies will approve nominations and elect state leaders. Tell us more about this process, Victor.
Well, according to the Chinese constitution, the Chinese president has the right to nominate persons for key positions in the government, including the prime minister, etc. And for this year, as part of the political reform, there is a new position, that is the chairman of the State Supervision Commission, which is a very high-ranking, very important anti-corruption organization. And the nomination by the Chinese president need to be reviewed and approved by the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress. And this is the event that we are going to see today. And I would say that the delegates of the MPC will be gathered in the Great Hall of the People.
And as we just get to know, ballots have been distributed to MPC deputies right now, and they're going to make their decision very soon. So please carry on.
Yes, exactly. So the MPC delegates will review and cast their ballots for the nominated officers, and eventually upon being elected, these very high-ranking officers will need to take the constitutional oath to work for the people in clean manner, for example, and to defend the Chinese constitution. So this is the major event that we are going to witness right now.
What do you make of this process, Ainan?
Well, I mean, there's not going to be much drama here. I mean, if there are any votes against, that would be unusual. I think it'll follow the pattern of the last few days where the overwhelming are supporting this. I mean, people don't understand. This is not like the House of Representatives where you're casting different opinions and you're just introducing things on the floor, amendments and things like this. In China, it moves like a glacier. Everything is carefully planned out. In the United States, under Donald Trump, it moves more like a wildfire. You never know which way the political winds are blowing. But I think one thing that we should be paying attention to today is the 7 special committees that are set up. There could be more, because this is a time of great transition. And you're seeing a real shakeup, a reorganization of the government, 15 fewer departments under the State Council, and there's going to be a mechanism to make sure that that goes through, and I think who leads that and who's providing the energy is going to be very important.
So we'll be talking about reforms in state institutions later, but back to what you just brought up. Can we say that the Chinese political system pays more attention to unity and certainty, Victor?
Well, the Chinese political system is very special and very unique. We call it a system probably with Chinese characteristics.
And it fits China's condition.
It fits the Chinese condition, and it has generated miracles and a huge transformation of China politically, economically speaking, over the past 40 years. And I think the Chinese people have confidence in the correctness of this political system, and we want to stick to it. And I think it will be continued for many, many years, many, many decades to come. And I think what we are witnessing today is a reflection of the viability of this political system. It's very much orderly, and it very much projects a view of consensus, a view of unity, a view of moving in the same direction to achieve the same unified goal. And I think for a big country like China with very, very challenging circumstances, we need this kind of united vision, united goal for the whole nation. We cannot afford to really split into fractions and factions and different groups and different opinions, for example, whereas the whole country will be paralyzed by the dissenting views of everyone. And I think it's much better a system for China, at least according to the Chinese people, to move in the same direction, to really build up the national capacities, to improve the living standards of the people, and to make China stronger, not only here at home, but also on the global stage.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll be getting back to you very soon. With MPC deputies set to elect a head of the newly formed Supervision Commission, many have expressed concern it will become a kind of superpower in domestic affairs. Minister of Supervision Yang Xiaodu addressed the issue at a minister's corridor. Take a listen.
After the Supreme People's Court Anti-Corruption Department and Supreme People's Procuratorate Anti-Corruption System joins the State Supervisory Commission, the staff in central and local supervision and discipline inspection departments will expect to increase around 10%. Second, in the process of increasing staffing, the areas the Commission supervises will expand, but the types of supervision and authorities will stay the same. The ways to supervise and inspect will comply with the party's discipline inspection and central government's administrative supervision. We don't think we are an organization with superpowers. The majority of our jobs focus on reminding about complying with rules and principles. It is about supervising and preventing individuals from making mistakes. It is to prevent the small mistakes from growing into big ones. There is no doubt that we will harshly punish those individuals who break the rules.
China's draft supervision law was submitted for its third reading at the National Legislature on Tuesday. A day later, it was reviewed by the National People's Congress. Now let's take a look at the main content of the draft supervision law.
The draft supervision law comprises 9 parts, including general rule, supervisory agencies and their responsibilities, scope and authority, jurisdiction, procedure, international cooperation in anti-corruption, supervision of supervisory agencies and officials, legal responsibilities, and subsidiary rules. Altogether 69 articles. The main content contains 7 aspects. There are: specify the guiding ideology and leadership system of supervisory work, specify the principles and rules of supervision, specify the formation and responsibility of the Supervisory Commission, realize the full supervisory coverage of public officials exercising public power, endow the supervisory body with necessary authority, strictly regulate supervision and inspection procedures, and strengthen the oversight of the supervisory authority and personnel.
Drawing out of the law has been a long process. How was it drafted and what revisions were made to it? Take a look.
In November 2016, the CPC Central Committee proposed trying out the national supervision system in Beijing, Shanxi Province, and Zhejiang Province. In December, the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress approved the decision to implement the trial. In January 2017, the 18th Central Committee of Discipline Inspection of the CPC decided to push forward on drawing up the national supervision law. In November, the Standing Committee of the 12th NPC reviewed the draft law and published it online to seek public suggestions. The draft went through the second revision in December. This added more regulations on the detention of those being investigated.
Supervisory commissions have been set up in 31 provinces, autonomous regions, and municipalities. But it is still just a trial process. We have to have a law to provide the basis and complete the supervisory system.
On March 11th, the first plenary session of the 13th National People's Congress approved the amendment to China's constitution. This established the National Supervisory Commission's legal status as a state institution. The NPC Standing Committee briefed the Congress on the draft supervision law on Tuesday. Delegations then began reviewing the draft separately.
Now we've just got the latest from the Great Hall of the People. Chinese President and Chairman of the Central Military Commission, Xi Jinping, has just nominated Li Keqiang as Premier and Xu Qiliang and Zhang Youxia as Vice Chairpersons of the Central Military Commission. Also, we've got a list of other candidates for state leadership positions. Yang Xiaodu is the candidate for National Supervisory Commission. Zhou Qiang is the candidate for Chief Justice, and Zhang Jun is the candidate for Chief Procurator. And of course, we'll keep you updated with the latest from this ongoing session at Great Hall of the People. Now, more about China's political season. Shanxi province was one of the 3 places selected for a supervisory reform pilot program. Our reporter Hu Chao went to the capital, Taiyuan, to find out how Shanxi's new office is making a difference.
In July last year, Guo Hai, former party secretary and chairman of a local state-owned coal group in North China's Shanxi province, was sentenced to 13 years in prison for bribery of 16 million yuan and misconduct in office. The case had lasted 3 years before it was taken on and wrapped up by the Shanxi Provincial Supervision Commission in just 4 months. In January 2017, Shanxi set up the first provincial supervision commission in China. It shares its office and staff with party discipline inspectors and incorporates existing anti-graft governmental and procuratorate agencies and staff. Zhou Yuewu had been following the case of Guo Hai. He's impressed by the high efficiency of the new office.
Guo Hai violated both party discipline and the law, so his case had to be handled by different offices, which led to inefficiency and made it last for years. After setting up the new office, it only took us 80 days to complete the investigation. The advantages of our integrated anti-corruption force really impressed me.
The Guo Hai case also used the new detention system introduced in the draft supervision law to replace the previous Liang Gui system. The new system aims to legalize the measures needed for investigations.
Using the system requires very strict approval from both the party committee of the same level and a higher level commission to prevent abuse. The system also has clear rules on notifying the family within 24 hours and a 3-month-long detention limit.
Since the pilot began, new supervision commissions have also been set up at provincial, city, and county levels across China. One big change with the new system is that not only party members, but all personnel in public sectors who exercise public power will be supervised by it.
We've already handled some cases of misconduct of some public personnel who are not party members but hold public power. Many of them have expressed recognition and understanding of our work, and some also thanked us for preventing them from breaking regulations and laws.
The pilot experience in Shanxi contributed to the draft supervision law, and the passage of the supervision law would lay the legal foundations for an upgraded anti-corruption campaign. China believes the law will ensure an authoritative and efficient supervisory system. and also modernize the country's governance system and capabilities. Hu Shao, CGTN, Taiyuan, Shanxi Province.
Now let's get more insights from our guest. Gentlemen, let's talk about this coming up National Supervisory Commission. How important is this body for the whole governance, Victor?
Well, in terms of the hierarchical importance, this is a very high-ranking organ of power in China, ranks directly on a par with the Supreme Court, with the Supreme Prosecutor's Office, and also on the same level with the State Council. So this is very important. Secondly, in terms of its functions, it is really designed to fight against corruption of all forms and shapes, and it more or less kind of combines the state function together with the former functions vested in the CPC Central Committee Disciplinary Commission. And going forward, we will have one supervision commission which can deal with corruptions of all kinds involving either party officials or non-party officials. It creates consistency of the same standards to be applied to all kinds of people caught up in corruption cases. And it also creates much more transparency. In terms of the procedures, it is, I think, very much on a par with the former procedures. However, it also has very new distinctions for the new rules and procedures for the SSC, mainly because I think the former way of 双规, for example, that is restricting people in terms of their movements from one place to another or from one time to another, for example, will no longer be used. And this 双规 system was very controversial. Many people actually criticized whether it is legal or above legal, for example. Going forward, for SSC to use the same standardized way to deal with these cases will create a lot of assurance for everyone involved in these corruption cases that they will be subject to the same standards, regardless of whether they are party officials or non-party officials. This, in my view, will strengthen the commitment of everyone involved in China to fight against corruption, because it becomes much more transparent and it becomes much more sunshine-based, and everyone will be assured of the rules and procedures and the standards going forward.
Better supervision and transparency. What's your take, Ina?
Well, I think you have to look at this on a larger level. First off, you have the oath. And now what is very clear is that China is a rule of law. When you have the chairman with his badge standing up there, hand on the Constitution, taking the same oath that everyone else has to, now you're under the same system. This idea that the party should be treated separately from the government workers is nonsense. I mean, you're both there to serve the people. Why should there be two different systems? And that leads to this issue about creating efficiencies within government. It's, China has a huge government, it's a huge bureaucracy. There has to be attempts to continually make it more efficient, to kind of curb off the excesses. And I think you're going to see this not only in this, but throughout the system. I mean, the massive reorganization that we're talking about that's going on is all aimed at making things more transparent, more efficient, and getting ready. You cannot ask the people and the businesses to be more efficient and productive if you're not doing it yourself.
And let's talk about the process of establishing this national supervisory system. As we just watched from our reporter's story, it started as several pilot programs in several places across China. Then it was promoted to the whole country after the success of those pilot programs. What do you make of this process, Victor?
Well, I think going through the right process to do the thing according to all the right rules and procedures is very important. In China, before this major reform, the system for anti-corruption involved two parties. One is the CPC Central Committee Disciplinary Commission, which has its counterparts on the provincial level, city level, county level. So it's an intra-party system, well established, very effective, and contributed a great deal against corruption over the past 5 years. Now, on the government side, in the State Council, there is a ministry called a Ministry of Supervision, which more or less is a shadow cabinet ministry, more or less combined together with a CPC Central Committee Disciplinary
And
Commission.
now this ministry, as Aina just mentioned, in restructuring, it will be merged into the National Supervision Commission.
Exactly. Going forward, there will be no longer a Ministry of Supervision under or within the State Council. It's way elevated to become on the par with the Supreme Court. So in this sense, the ministry of the SSC, as we call it, is much more enhanced in terms of its authorization and power, with a full-blown system with authority to hire many qualified people, etc. But its legal authority has also been heightened and improved. And I think this system, after being approved and adopted by the National People's Congress, will be well embedded in the system of state organs in China. And as we just now mentioned, it creates a lot of transparency and sunshine-based rules and procedures, and it will create a lot of certainty.
Let's be frank. The reason they did this is because of exactly the system you talked about. When you have all these different levels of supervisory, it was very easy or very tempting for people to get involved, to call people. These at each level, everyone knows everybody, and there was this problem. So by elevating it, I mean, she is sending a very strong message that he is going to continue this anti-corruption, that he's reshaping the party and the government to serve the people. And this is first and foremost, because he's sending a very strong message to everybody out there. They said, look, this is not something where we're going to let off. We're actually improving the system. It's going to be something that's of much higher power, which cannot be interfered with.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll be getting back to you. And going after corruption is not new for China. The country has been chasing corrupt officials, from high-ranking tigers to low-level flies, over the past 5 years. Zheng Yibing reports.
An iron fist against the corruption, with the numbers setting records. From 2013 to 2017, more than 250,000 officials were investigated for suspected involvement in duty-related crimes, a 16.4% rise from the previous 5 years. Losses of over 55.3 billion yuan, or around $8.7 billion were recovered. And Chinese courts concluded graft cases involving 101 former officials at the provincial and ministerial level or above, such as former Security Chief Zhou Yongkang and former Chongqing Municipality Party Secretary Bo Xilai.
We've maintained high pressure on graft and improved our judicial mechanism for handling job-related crimes.
Corruption at lower levels was also tackled. More than 62,000 corrupt grassroots officers were charged, such as those in charge of local agriculture, housing demolitions, social welfare, and poverty alleviation. The intensified campaign also targeted suspects who fled overseas. Beijing has carried out operations like Skynet and Foxhunt, and 222 fugitives of duty-related crime suspects have been brought home since late 2014.
Zero tolerance, zero loophole, and zero obstacle. China's commitment on fighting corruption sends a key message. There is nowhere to hide for fugitives.
Since November 2012, China has intensified its anti-corruption measures, including disciplinary inspections and supervisory reform. Supervisory commissions at the provincial, prefecture, and county levels were formed to keep an eye on public officials. The National Supervisory Commission is also expected to be established at the ongoing first session of the 13th National People's Congress.
It aims to enhance the party's unified leadership on anti-corruption campaigns and cover everyone working in the public sector who exercises public power.
Officials said China's efforts aim to better protect human rights and uphold justice. Many believe the reforms will mean closer supervision of those exercising public power and ensure the healthy development of Chinese society. Zheng Yibing, CGTN, Beijing.
We can say that China has become more confident and active. We know this is because of its strong economic power. China is a practical country, and its policies suits the state of its nation. China honors benefiting both itself and its partner. China's foreign policies have become more effective and active. and is assuming more responsibility in international affairs.
We believe the two sessions are of great importance because it involves not only Chinese domestic affairs, but also the relationship between China and other countries. China has always been committed to settling disputes in a peaceful and friendly way. We take China as a very responsible friend, and we hope China could play a great role in our regional affairs.
We focused on the government work report delivered by Premier Li Keqiang. We also listened to China's expectations for the coming years. China is a major country in the world. Also, Lebanon is a member of the Belt and Road Initiative.
From our point of view, what is interesting particularly is China's continuing commitment to an open economy, to international trade, and to fostering relations with countries all over the world. So we look in the reports of the National People's Congress and the CPPCC for the signals that China's continuing on that path, and that has been very evident from the statements made by ministers and by leaders.
I think this is a very important event. I must say that we are interested in all of these things. But of course, I mean, everything that comes to China's international role, environment, also, I mean, the conditions under which foreign companies are going to operate here, if there are anything on those issues. So they definitely are of great interest to us.
We are watching a special live coverage on CGTN on China's political season. We've just got the latest from the Great Hall of the People. NPC deputies are now voting over the nominations and candidates of state leadership positions, and we'll keep you updated on that. And for more insight, let's talk to our studio guest. Gentlemen, let's continue with our earlier topic, anti-corruption and institution building. Talking about this National Supervisory Commission, Aina, what do you think would be the key tasks when it officially comes out?
Well, it's how you implement it. I mean, it's fine to say that you had it. I mean, China follows these things, you know, feeling the stones while crossing the river. I mean, this is from Deng. This is why they have these pilot programs. They try to make sure that they can be rolled out on a national basis, and what any kind of kinks in the system and how to do it. So what you have is an organizational issue. You have two departments. They have to be brought together. There has to be a decision of who's going to be in charge, what standards, how quickly it's rolled out. There is an education process. Despite the fact that this is being announced here, all of the government officials have to be told exactly what this is going to mean. They need to take their oaths. They need to do all of the things that are necessary to put this system in place. So it's an organizational change at the same time as there are a lot of other organizational changes going on. So that's why I was talking earlier about these supervisory commissions that are going to be out there. It's going to be very important work for them to make sure that the education process and the rollout is smooth.
And this is a big step in institutional building indeed. And can we say that this is also a step taken from being reactive to corruption to proactive, to prevent corruption from happening, Victor?
Yes, indeed. I think, as you mentioned, China has never stopped anti-corruption campaigns. However, at different historical periods, the way how you did it differed a great deal from one period to another. And I think under Xi Jinping and also under Wang Qishan, the former chairman of the CPC Central Committee Disciplinary Commission, they wanted to change the way anti-corruption is done, from dealing with individual corrupt officials to institutionalize a whole range of things, including mentality, for example, and including deterrence, for example, and including the follow-up investigation and punishment and education of the non-violating party members and party officials. And in this way, they believe that we can have a more institutionalized, front-loaded check and balance system, so that the officials not only do not dare to be corrupt, they do not even want to think about to be corrupt, because they know that the deterrence is built into the system, people are mobilized, and the punishment system will be waiting for them if they are caught and proven to be guilty, for example. And this will really, hopefully at least, bring about a fundamental change in the way these officials wield their power. Power corrupts, and in China is not an exception. And absolute power corrupts absolutely. We just want to have enough checks and balances so that people will change and they will no longer think about corruption. Even if they hold the power in their hands, they hold power going forward only for the purpose of serving the people.
And many observers are also saying that corruption is a universal challenge without a universal solution. So, Aina, do you think each and every country should deal with this problem based on their unique political and national conditions?
Well, normally I'd agree with you, but I think that you should study every system that's out there, and you should study the ones that are most efficient. I mean, quite frankly, in the U.S., it's almost legalized. This is what they call lobbying. You can one day you're in a place of power, and the next day you're lobbying the people you knew there. Yes, there's a certain tolerance within each area that they have to do it. I think China's system is not unfair, and I don't understand why there's all this kind of reaction that's going on in the international press. Quite frankly, I mean, everyone, 10, 15 years ago, everyone was complaining about corruption around the world, and they said, oh, China, there's corruption there. So now that they've addressed it, all people say, oh, what about human rights and individual rights? The fact is, these are government employees. This is not this ordinary citizenry that we're talking about. And this is often mixed in the international news. What this is are people who have sworn to uphold the government and serve the people, and they're now subject to a uniform system that is going to try to check them and keep them in line. They're just necessary things that were part of this system. And as we said, they had to elevate this body to keep it away from local influence, from people being able to tweak it a little bit, get away with things. Because it's like a cancer. Once somebody starts doing it and other people know and nothing happens to them, all right, it will spread. And Xi Jinping has been very, very active in his area of getting rid of the bad apples, of making it clear that this will not be tolerated.
No matter the tigers or flies.
It doesn't matter. Actually, in many ways, I mean, it was very important to go after the tigers, but the flies are even more. If I live in a village and I see every day the results of corruption, the fact that the party secretary has enriched himself and his family, that the money that was meant for roads is going to his friends, that the schools that I send my children to, or that the economic opportunities are not there. I live with that every day. This is something that is intolerable. All right, and it doesn't matter if it's in the USA, Europe, or China. This kind of corruption cannot be allowed to things because, as I said, it becomes a cancer.
As Aina just mentioned, President Xi Jinping has been leading this tough campaign against corruption since taking office. What does this tell about his governing style?
I think President Xi Jinping is a man of courage, of vision, of wisdom, and also a leader dedicated to serving the people, to serve China, and to promote peace and stability in the world. His anti-corruption campaign, first of all, is absolutely the right thing to do. China cannot afford to be burdened down by corruption, because otherwise, as Anna said, it becomes a cancer, it erodes the system, it destroys the legitimacy of the government, of the party to serve, for example. And I think fighting against corruption wins the overwhelming support from people, including me, for example. We all wholeheartedly support this campaign. Secondly, anti-corruption is very, very difficult, very, very painful. Sometimes you need to really turn the gun on your comrades, on people who you know, on people sitting above you, or people sitting at the same level of you, or on people who used to be your assistants, for example. It could be bloody, it could be very, very painful.
And it's all about principles.
It's all about principles.
Well, there's also the issue that you have a one-party system. If the party tolerates corruption, all right, the party is corrupt. I mean, so therefore there can be zero. This is not like the U.S. or other democracies where you say, oh, I don't like you, I'm going to vote for you. All right? There's a pressure relief valve. The government here doesn't have that luxury.
You're right.
So therefore, yes, when you take that oath, it's serious. And you are accepting the fact that you're going to be under special supervision, and that anything you do will be questioned as to your things. There's no choice.
Absolutely. Zero tolerance for corruption, and I think President Xi Jinping is doing the right thing to lead the whole nation, the whole party, and to come up with new mentality, new way of looking, and new institutions to fight against corruption. And I think we are getting closer and closer to a better way of distributing power and for officials to wield their power, and that is to serve the people rather than to enrich themselves or their family members or their cronies, for example. And this will help restore the confidence of the people in the legitimacy of the ruling party, in the viability of our political system, and in the correctness of the political path we are following.
Right, as we mentioned briefly, we need a better structure. The country needs a better structure to make good things work, to serve the people. So talking about this state institutions restructuring and reforms, new ministries, new departments have been created, and some old ones have been merged into new ministry functions. What impresses you the most in this reform draft?
Well, frankly, that you're willing to do it, because there's. When you go into a bureaucracy, everything is the way it is for a reason, not necessarily a good reason. Often what started under one administration becomes redundant, or you've changed it, or there's more emphasis. There has to be a house cleaning. And how many times have you seen that internationally? Very, very rarely do you actually see an institutional change, a sweeping up, getting rid of those things that are inefficient. Within China, it was very easy with this large bureaucracy for fiefdoms and factions to spring up. I'll support you, you support me, the faction approach. Or fiefdoms, this is my area, I'm going to enlarge it. I don't need the budget for what I do, I'm just going to get more budget. Why? Because it gives me more power. So this has to be addressed. It's something that's endemic, you never get rid of it. The only thing you can do is continue to fight it.
And it's all about breaking vested interests and interest groups, right, Victor?
Yes, indeed. Institutions are not the ends in themselves. Institutions should be a means to achieve an end. However, once you create an institution, they take on their own life. They take on their own vested interest. And eventually, if you do not pay enough attention, sometimes institutions take on so much of their own life, they forget the ultimate mission they were created to serve. And that will destroy the whole purpose of these institutions. In China, I think we need to be very wary of the turf war, of the institutional problems, for example, the vested interests, and also given the fast change in China, which takes place every day, the institutions, once
in
they
its economy, in its society, and people's changing demands for a better life, everything, right?
Absolutely. So once you create an institution, it tends to lag behind the circumstances on the ground, which keep changing. Therefore, the institutions need to be fine-tuned, need to be modified, sometimes need to be revamped, sometimes need to be abolished, and new institutions need to be created. So it's a very, very fast-moving situation in China, and I'm hopeful that the institutional reforms at the state council level this time, which are meant to make the whole ministries, agencies, bureaus leaner and more efficient, will better help with discharge.
And talking about this, let's cross live to the Great Hall of the People, and people's will matters in all these we just mentioned, and NPC deputies are voting over the nominations and candidates that we've just mentioned for state leadership positions. You're watching live footage from the Great Hall of the People. NPC deputies are now voting on the nominations and candidates of state leadership positions. As we just reported, Chinese President and Chairman of the Central Military Commission Xi Jinping nominated Li Keqiang as Premier of the State Council, and Xi Jinping nominated Xu Qiliang and Zhang Youxia as Vice Chairpersons of the Central Military Commission. Yang Xiaodu is the candidate for the National Supervisory Commission. Zhou Tiang is the candidate for Chief Justice, and Zhang Jun is the candidate for the Chief Procurator. Now, gentlemen, we can see that NPC deputies are voting. It's a people's vote. What do you make of the representation system of the National People's Congress? Victor?
Well, in China, at the NPC, we have close to about 3,000 delegates, and they come from all of the provinces, all of the cities, and all walks of life, and they are truly the representative of the people. They come to the Great Hall of the People to attend the NPC meeting, to listen to the reports, to review the documents, and now they are casting their votes. They cast their votes not only in their own personal capacity as delegates, but as representative of the constituency they come from. And this is the Chinese democracy at its best. You see how this whole thing works. You see the interactions between the Congress, between the Chinese government, between the Chinese Communist Party of China, and also with CPPCC, all these different entities, how they interact with each other and their dynamics with each other, their impacts on each other. So this is truly a very, very educational thing for most of us, and educational thing for the whole nation, because they see this, they are really participating in this, and this keeps the Chinese democracy, with Chinese characteristics, of course, very vibrant and very dynamic.
And now we're witnessing Chinese democracy in action. What do you make of the representation?
Well, you know, there's a huge gulf between the knowledge of what happens in China and people's, you know, what happens in other nations. So people from Europe and the United States, they look at this, they don't understand it. They're looking for people to be, you know, fighting and shouting like if you go to Taiwan or South Korea. Yeah, they're looking for drama in the theater. And this is not the way the system works. I mean, it's a one-party system. Everything that is done, like we were just talking about the supervision things, this was not just some idea floated into the group. Oh, what do you think? We'll have a new supervision system. This was tried out, all right? There was a lot of planning, a lot of organization. It was reviewed consultations and things like this. So by the time it reaches this body, really it's in its final form. And this is a way of demonstrating that, you know, you have this wide body of representatives. There are people from the military, one quarter are women. You have people from all of the national minorities. You have people who are, you know, janitors, people who are businessmen. Migrant workers. Everybody is there. And it is a show that this is the will of the people. But it's not the way you would expect it in the House of Representatives, the United States, or Parliament. It is a completely different system. It works.
Can we say it's more about getting things done and reaching a consensus and moving forward?
But this is the key: consensus. If you're in another body, a representative body, it's back and forth. You have the two parties or more vying against each other, saying, "No, anything you say, I disagree with." All right, and this is they think this is a positive. And it works perhaps for their system, but in China it's large. There's too many divisive factioning and things like this that can occur, and miscommunication. So you don't have that. China has developed a system that works for China. All right, economically, I don't think anyone is, and even politically, the fact that you have a leader who's now looking forward. I would characterize this as the third inflection point for China. All right, 3 leaders who stepped forward and said, look, we have a system, but we need to look forward. It's not yesterday's answers that we can rely on. It's developing new ones. We have to have a change in order to create the future. And this is very refreshing. As I said, where is this happening in the rest of the world?
Right. Oh, well, gentlemen, I don't know if you've noticed, during this year's 2 sessions, so far, 6 members of the Political Bureau of the CPC Central Committee have published articles regarding the party and state-level institutional reforms on Renmin Bao People's Daily, the official newspaper of the CPC, and each article is very long, about 5,000 to 6,000 words. And from my readout, it seems there are 2 principles here: consolidate party's leadership and people-centered principle. What do you make of this, Victor?
Now, I think it's very important for important leaders of the Communist Party of China, in this case, mostly members of the Politburo, including, for example, the article I read is by Ding Xuexiang, a member of the Politburo and chief of the CPC Central Committee, General Affairs Committee, for example. These articles are very, very important because we need to minimize the so-called mystery surrounding the top leaders of the Communist Party of China. We need to make them much more transparent, and they need to directly speak to the people. For example, by publishing articles like this, they can make their views, who represent the government and the party, for example, better known to the party members and better known to the ordinary citizen. Everyone can read about them. They can measure what they write about with official documents published by the CPC Central Committee, for example, their committee meetings, and in this case, the MPC session as well as the CPPCC session. This helps the communication, and this also helps rallying the people around the party in the right way, because they will better understand what's the key message, what's the key direction that we are going through, mainly because these political and economic reforms that we are talking about being discussed as we speak at the MPC session are very, very complicated, and they are very in-depth, and they are very broad in the range, and it really takes a lot of reading, a lot of education, a lot of self-education to really understand. But if you take a look at
all those process from the two principles we've just mentioned, do you think it will be easier for people to understand?
Well, I think people need to understand them, and they need to listen to the speeches, watch television, read about these printed articles being published.
Victor, let us be honest here. I mean, most people aren't paying that much attention. They're paying more attention to the getting food on the table and
that's about their livelihood.
That's
this is also one of the principles for this time's reforms.
But this is the whole point. What you said. There are two simple points.
Yes.
All right. I mean, at a time when the Gini index around the world is going crazy, China's last year has actually decreased. All right, Xi Jinping and the government has taken a very strong stance that this is going to be a time of social change. That the economic change has been good; it must be continued and managed, but the people have to be part of the system. And I mean, the war on the actions against poverty. Setting deadlines when these things are going to happen. These are a very strong pollution. These are very strong signals that, look, this is a country that's going to have a balanced growth. It's not going to be growth at any cost. It's going to be inclusive. And part of this is reforming the government. So it's very simple. And the reason it's important that you have 6 of them saying this is they're showing, yes, we all support these changes that will make your lives better. That's the takeaway. Not reading in depth about every article or small change or things. Just how will this affect me and why are they doing this?
And through their feelings toward these real changes happening, and eventually people will get the essence of the reforms, right, Victor?
Yeah, indeed. Coming back to your question, expanding the power of the Communist Party of China, I think the situation in China is changing over the past 40 years.
I don't think it's necessarily about expanding the power. It's about consolidating the leading role, right?
Yes, strengthening the leading role of the Communist Party of China.
Accountability and responsibility.
One example is that 40 years ago we did not have any private ownership. Now we have many, many private companies. And whether every private company has a party branch is questionable. Therefore, the CPC now is emphasizing that regardless of whether you are a state-owned enterprise or privately owned enterprise, you need to set up, or you need to allow Communist Party members to set up a branch in your company. This is a change. Many foreign invested companies don't have a party branch in their company in China, but now they are encouraged to allow the existence of these party branches. This is, in a sense, to allow more room and more flexibility for the Communist Party members in China to get organized in branches, etc., in companies, regardless of whether they are Chinese companies or foreign companies, state-owned companies or private companies. This is a way to strengthen the so-called leadership of the Communist Party of China in China.
Well, I think I see it a little bit differently.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll pick this up later. And you've just watched the live footage from the Great Hall of the People, and MPC deputies are voting over the nominations and candidates of state leadership positions. You're watching a special live coverage on CGTN. Stay with us.
The biggest annual political gathering in the world's most populous nation. Some topics to deliberate and discuss. A new state leadership lined up. A draft revision to the Constitution. From March the 3rd CGTN takes you right to the heart of Beijing for a behind-the-scenes look at how 5,000 political representatives and advisors get things done, and how their decisions can have a ripple effect across the world. Join us on CGTN for an insight look into the Two Sessions 2018.
We travel across the country to gauge the most pressing issues.
We talk to the people about their greatest concerns.
And explore the changes closely watched around the world.
It's a signal come to an end. The ultimate power.
Not only for the channel expansion and reality.
Join us for a special coverage of China's political season and see how the new government launches into its new era.
Two Sessions is an exciting time. China has a rich history, but with lofty goals for the future.
As an African journalist covering the Two Sessions, I will share my insights into what the policies entail and how they will affect my continent and the rest of the world.
1.4 billion people heading in the same direction. How will the policies of the coming days keep the country on track?
Controlling financial risk is most critical. Broadening anti-corruption is most meaningful. President Xi Jinping's vision for 2035 and for 2050 is most enduring.
A team of journalists from China and around the world looking at critically important issues that will help define the 21st century.
The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line.
If we move together, we can have a dance.
Straight into the eyes.
Poverty alleviation achievement in China is unprecedented.
To me, it's a responsibility.
Straightforward and straight into the new era.
To know more and to sense more.
Straight Talk with Tian Wei from the Two Sessions.
You're watching CGTN. This is a special live coverage on China's political season. We've just got the latest from the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. NPC deputies are voting over nominations and candidates of top state leadership positions. And we'll keep you updated on that. But now more global news. Voting has started in Russia's Far East, where citizens are casting their ballots in the country's presidential election. There are more than 97,000 domestic polling stations and more than 400 overseas stations. Voting in Moscow and other areas will open later on Sunday. Voters in Kaliningrad, the westernmost exclave of Russia, will be the last to go to the polls, which will close at 8 p.m. local time on Sunday. Incumbent Russian President Vladimir Putin has remained favorable despite facing issues such as strained economic growth caused by Western sanctions and dropping oil prices. Tambor went to Moscow and a rural area outside of the city to find out if Putin's idea of a strong Russia resonates with locals.
The EU and the US introduced sanctions against Moscow back in 2014 as a result of Crimea, formerly part of Ukraine, and was absorbed into Russia early in the year. Mr. Putin retaliated by banning all EU import of fruit, vegetable, meat, fish, and dairy products, and that in turn has led to a boom in domestic production, which has reportedly helped Putin win over a large number of farmers from rural areas. Now, I found a cheesemaker outside of Moscow. Let's find out if he supports Putin and why. One poster boy for the boom in Russia's cheese production is Oleg Sirota. The 30-year-old former computer programmer gave up studying livestock farming back in college because he saw no future in the industry back then. But when Putin put an embargo on EU dairy products, Oleg realized the time had come.
The competition between local cheesemakers and those from the EU was not fair before the sanctions because the foreign companies were well subsidized by their own countries, so their dairy products were cheaper. I started my own cheese factory in 2014 after Putin issued the ban. Now local cheese production is booming and we're benefiting from it.
Oleg said that there used to be only 6 proper mass producers of cheese in Russia before the ban. Now the number has gone up to 400. In the first 11 months of last year, Russia produced more than 600,000 tons of cheese and dairy products, up 8.5% from the year before that. But that's not the only major reason Oleg supports Putin.
Actually, I was quite against the Putin before. I even attended some opposition meetings in 2012. But Putin managed to bring back Crimea and make the West to respect our country. Putin has made Russia the country that I was dreaming about when I was a child. That's why I support him from A to Z.
To show Putin his appreciation, Oleg has made him a special wheel of cheese with the president's name on it. Additionally, Oleg and more than 100 other cheese producers in the Moscow area signed a letter requesting Putin to keep the embargo on EU dairy products. Putin consistently scores higher in opinion polls than all his rivals combined. His ideas of patriotic leadership, managed democracy, and a strong Russia resonate well with the people. The cheesemaker Oleg is one example. Right now, I am in Moscow's central business district, and I'm about to find some supporters of Putin and verify the claim.
Putin is a strong leader. The world's respect for Russia has grown during his term.
I support Putin because he has improved Russia's economy. I hope he makes our country better integrated into the international community.
I believe in Putin as he has been working hard on improving people's lives.
Those who don't support Putin hope the country can make some concrete measures to improve the economy in the next 6 years.
The country should further improve its economy, environment, and domestic production as much as possible.
The state should help people lead a better life from now on, providing more equal chances.
Experts say Putin enjoys wide and favorable support from almost all demographics, and that has a lot to do with his foreign policies that keeps Russia a major global power. Tambo, CGTN, Moscow.
Russia has ordered expulsion of 23 British diplomats in Moscow as the diplomatic crisis between the two countries deepens. The latest move by the Russian Foreign Ministry is in retaliation for the expulsion of the same number of Russian diplomats in Britain who were ordered to leave in response to a nerve agent attack on a former Russian double agent. Richard Bastic reports from London.
The Russian Foreign Ministry's expulsions had been anticipated. Indeed, Britain's ambassador to Moscow, Laurie Bristow, was inside the building for just 10 minutes, receiving the names of those who'd be getting on a flight home. As well as expulsions, Moscow's added the closure of the British Council Cultural Centre in Russia and an end to plans for a reopening of a consulate in St. Petersburg. The expulsion numbers exactly mirror those expelled by the British at the Russian embassy in London. The row, a nerve agent attack in Britain on a former Russian spy, Sergei Skripal, and his daughter Yulia, both still critically ill in hospital. UK Prime Minister Theresa May has been briefed by police chiefs at the scene of the attack. She says the latest diplomatic expulsions in Moscow change nothing.
Russia's response doesn't change the facts of the matter. The attempted assassination of 2 people on British soil, for which there is no alternative conclusion other than that the Russian state was culpable. It is Russia that is in flagrant breach of international law and the Chemical Weapons Convention.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Kazakhstan accused the UK of failing to produce real evidence of Russian involvement and misleading the public.
On Monday, the European Union meets to discuss the deepening crisis between London and Moscow. Many member states in the EU calling for a heightening of sanctions against Russia.
French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Angela Merkel said this week they both stood by the UK and were considering next steps. Richard Bestick, CGTN, London.
British police have launched a murder investigation into the death of London-based Russian businessman Nikolai Glushkov. Glushkov was 68 years old. He was an associate of Boris Berezovsky, a Russian oligarch and strong Kremlin critic who died under disputed circumstances in 2013. On Saturday, counterterrorism detectives leading the case removed a car believed to belong to Glushkov from his house in the New Modern area. He was found dead at his South London home on Monday. Russia's top agency for major crimes said it has launched its own investigation into Glushkov's death. The DPRK's and Sweden's foreign ministers have ended 3 days of talks on the security situation on the Korean peninsula. The talks may help pave way for a planned meeting between US President Donald Trump and the leader of the DPRK, Kim Jong-un. The DPRK's Minister Ri Yong-ho arrived in Stockholm on Thursday for talks with his Swedish counterpart, Margot Wallström. It came amid a flurry of diplomatic activity concerning the reclusive country and its nuclear programs. The Swedish Foreign Ministry made a statement that the foreign ministers discussed opportunities and challenges for continued diplomatic efforts in order to reach a peaceful solution for the Korean peninsula. Russia says more than 44,000 people have been evacuated from Syria's eastern Ghouta area, with 27,000 leaving on Saturday alone. Thousands are trying to escape two raging offensives in the country's north and south. The monitor group says airstrikes killed at least 30 civilians on Saturday. In the past month, the government has retaken 70% of eastern Ghouta, carving it up into 3 shrinking pockets held by different rebel groups. You're watching CGTN. Now we've got the latest from China's ongoing political season. The 13th National People's Congress started a 6th plenary meeting of its first session Sunday morning in Beijing. Deputies voted to decide on new leaders for national institutions. Li Keqiang has been nominated by Xi Jinping as candidate for Premier of the State Council of the People's Republic of China. Zhang Youxia and Xu Qiliang have been nominated as candidates for the Vice Chairman of the Central Military Commission, and candidates for members of the Central Military Commission have also been announced. They include Wei Fenghe, Li Zuocheng, Miao Hua and Zhang Shengmin. Meanwhile, Yang Xiaodu has been nominated as candidate for Director of the National Supervisory Commission, Zhou Qiang nominated as candidate for the President of the Supreme People's Court, and Zhang Jun nominated as candidate for the Procurator-General of the Supreme People's Procuratorate. And we'll keep you updated with the latest. More global news now. The European Union wants to reform its common visa policy. The new rules will strengthen security and make better use of technology. But could a cost increase for Schengen visas make people reconsider traveling to Europe? Mariam Zaidi reports.
Dong Wei is a 22-year-old Chinese student in Brussels. Today is her last day interning at the European Parliament. Getting a visa to come to Europe wasn't difficult for Dong Wei. Her college in China had an exchange program with a Belgian university who helped her get a Schengen visa.
With this Schengen visa, I traveled not only in Belgium, in France, in Germany, and Netherlands, and also Spain. If I apply for the student visa by myself, and it will take more time, and I should prepare a lot of other documents.
Europe's Schengen area allows passport-free travel across 26 countries. But with the bloc looking to tighten its security in the wake of the worst migration crisis since World War II and terrorist attacks, its common visa policy needed an upgrade. Under new proposals, the visa application times will be reduced from 15 to 10 days, and multiple entry visas with longer validity will be given to frequent travellers. And application fees will be increased from 60 to 80 euros, or between $75 to $100.
But it also means that member states can maintain enough consular staff on a global scale, worldwide, to better serve applicants and upgrade their IT equipment and software to ensure stronger and security screenings.
So would the new rules make foreign travellers reconsider a visit to Europe?
Even though it will have a rise in the application fee, but the procedure is shortened, and the time is shortened too. And now we can fill in the electronic forms, and also we can submit on the internet, and it's easier.
But it's also the first time the EU is directly linking visa policy to curbing illegal migration flows. Now, through the new visa code, the EU wants to toughen its stance against third countries who do not readmit economic migrants, making it harder for citizens of those countries to obtain visas to the EU, should their countries not oblige.
To deliberate and discuss. A new state leadership lined up. A draft revision to the Constitution. From March the 3rd, CGTN takes you right to the heart of Beijing for a behind-the-scenes look at how 5,000 political representatives and advisors get things done, and how their decisions can have a ripple effect across the world. Join us on CGTN for an insight look into the Two Sessions 2018. The biggest annual political gathering in the world's most populous nation. Some topics to deliberate and discuss. A new state leadership lined up. A draft revision to the Constitution. From March the 3rd, CGTN takes you right to the heart of Beijing for a behind-the-scenes look at how 5,000 political representatives and advisors get things done, and how their decisions can have a ripple effect across the world. Join us on CGTN for an insight look into the Two Sessions 2018. The biggest annual political gathering in the world's most populous nation. Some topics to deliberate and discuss. A new state leadership lined up. A draft revision to the Constitution. From March the 3rd, CGTN takes you right to the heart of Beijing for a behind-the-scenes look at how 5,000 political representatives and advisors get things done, and how their decisions can have a ripple effect across the world. Join us on CGTN for an insight look into the Two Sessions 2018. The biggest annual political gathering in the world's most populous nation. Some topics to deliberate and discuss. A new state leadership lined up. A draft revision to the Constitution. From March the 3rd, CGTN takes you right to the heart of Beijing for a behind-the-scenes look at how 5,000 political representatives and advisors get things done, and how their decisions can have a ripple effect across the world. Join us on CGTN for an insight look into the Two Sessions 2018. The biggest annual political gathering in the world's most populous nation. Some topics to deliberate and discuss. A new state leadership lined up. A draft revision to the Constitution. From March the 3rd, CGTN takes you right to the heart of Beijing for a behind-the-scenes look at how 5,000 political representatives and advisors get things done, and how their decisions can have a ripple effect across the world. Join us on CGTN for an insight look into the Two Sessions 2018. The biggest annual political gathering in the world's most populous nation. Some topics to deliberate and discuss. A new state leadership lined up. A draft revision to the Constitution. From March the 3rd, CGTN takes you right to the heart of Beijing for a behind-the-scenes look at how 5,000 political representatives and advisors get things done, and how their decisions can have a ripple effect across the world. Join us on CGTN for an insight look into the Two Sessions 2018. The biggest annual political gathering in the world's most populous nation. Some topics to deliberate and discuss. A new state leadership lined up. A draft revision to the Constitution. From March the 3rd, CGTN takes you right to the heart of Beijing for a behind-the-scenes look at how 5,000 political representatives and advisors get things done, and how their decisions can have a ripple effect across the world. Join us on CGTN for an insight look into the Two Sessions 2018. The biggest annual political gathering in the world's most populous nation. Some topics to deliberate and discuss. A new state leadership lined up. A draft revision to the Constitution. From March the 3rd, CGTN takes you right to the heart of Beijing for a behind-the-scenes look at how 5,000 political representatives and advisors get things done, and how their decisions can have a ripple effect across the world. Join us on CGTN for an insight look into the Two Sessions 2018. The biggest annual political gathering in the world's most populous nation. Some topics to deliberate and discuss. A new state leadership lined up. A draft revision to the Constitution. From March the 3rd, CGTN takes you right to the heart of Beijing for a behind-the-scenes look at how 5,000 political representatives and advisors get things done, and how their decisions can have a ripple effect across the world. Join us on CGTN for an insight look into the Two Sessions 2018. the biggest annual political gathering in the world's most populous nation. Some topics to deliberate and discuss. A new state leadership lined up. A draft revision to the Constitution. From March the 3rd, CGTN takes you right to the heart of Beijing for a behind-the-scenes look at how 5,000 political representatives and advisors get things done, and how their decisions can have a ripple effect across the world. Join us on CGTN for an insight look into the Two Sessions 2018. The biggest annual political gathering in the world's most populous nation. Some topics to deliberate and discuss. A new state leadership lined up. A draft revision to the Constitution. From March the 3rd, CGTN takes you right to the heart of Beijing for a behind-the-scenes look at how 5,000 political representatives and advisors get things done, and how their decisions can have a ripple effect across the world. Join us on CGTN for an insight look into the Two Sessions 2018. The biggest annual political gathering in the world's most populous nation. Some topics to deliberate and discuss. A new state leadership lined up. A draft revision to the Constitution. From March the 3rd, CGTN takes you right to the heart of Beijing for a behind-the-scenes look at how 5,000 political representatives and advisors get things done, and how their decisions can have a ripple effect across the world. Join us on CGTN for an insight look into the Two Sessions 2018. The biggest annual political gathering in the world's most populous nation. Some topics to deliberate and discuss. A new state leadership lined up. A draft revision to the Constitution. From March the 3rd, CGTN takes you right to the heart of Beijing for a behind-the-scenes look at how 5,000 political representatives and advisors get things done, and how their decisions can have a ripple effect across the world. Join us on CGTN for an insight look into the Two Sessions 2018. The biggest annual political gathering in the world's most populous nation. Some topics to deliberate and discuss. A new state leadership lined up. A draft revision to the Constitution. From March the 3rd, CGTN takes you right to the heart of Beijing for a behind-the-scenes look at how 5,000 political representatives and advisors get things done, and how their decisions can have a ripple effect across the world. Join us on CGTN for an insight look into the Two Sessions 2018. The biggest annual political gathering in the world's most populous nation. Some topics to deliberate and discuss. A new state leadership lined up. A draft revision to the Constitution. From March the 3rd, CGTN takes you right to the heart of Beijing for a behind-the-scenes look at how 5,000 political representatives and advisors get things done, how their decisions can have a ripple effect across the world. Join us on CGTN for an insight look into the Two Sessions 2018. The biggest annual political gathering in the world's most populous nation. Some topics to deliberate and discuss. A new state leadership lined up. A draft revision to the Constitution. From March the 3rd, CGTN takes you right to the heart of Beijing for a behind-the-scenes look at how 5,000 political representatives and advisors get things done, and how their decisions can have a ripple effect across the world. Join us on CGTN for an insight look into the Two Sessions 2018. The biggest annual political gathering in the world's most populous nation. Some topics to deliberate and discuss. A new state leadership lined up. A draft revision to the Constitution. From March the 3rd, CGTN takes you right to the heart of Beijing for a behind-the-scenes look at how 5,000 political representatives and advisors get things done, and how their decisions can have a ripple effect across the world. Join us on CGTN for an insight look into the Two Sessions 2018. The biggest annual political gathering in the world's most populous nation. Some topics to deliberate and discuss. A new state leadership lined up. A draft revision to the Constitution. From March the 3rd, CGTN takes you right to the heart of Beijing for a behind-the-scenes look at how 5,000 political representatives and advisors get things done, and how their decisions can have a ripple effect across the world. Join us on CGTN for an insight look into the Two Sessions 2018. The biggest annual political gathering in the world's most populous nation. Some topics to deliberate and discuss. A new state leadership lined up. A draft revision to the Constitution. From March the 3rd, CGTN takes you right to the heart of Beijing for a behind-the-scenes look at how 5,000 political representatives and advisors get things done, and how their decisions can have a ripple effect across the world. Join us on CGTN for an insight look into the Two Sessions 2018. The biggest annual political gathering in the world's most populous nation. Some topics to deliberate and discuss. A new state leadership lined up. A draft revision to the Constitution. From March the 3rd, CGTN takes you right to the heart of Beijing for a behind-the-scenes look at how 5,000 political representatives and advisors get things done, and how their decisions can have a ripple effect across the world. Join us on CGTN for an insight look into the Two Sessions 2018. The biggest annual political gathering in the world's most populous nation. Some topics to deliberate and discuss. and new state leadership lined up, a draft revision to the Constitution. From March the 3rd, CGTN takes you right to the heart of Beijing for a behind-the-scenes look at how 5,000 political representatives and advisors get things done, and how their decisions can have a ripple effect across the world. Join us on CGTN for an insight look into the Two Sessions 2018. The biggest annual political gathering in the world's most populous nation. Some topics to deliberate and discuss, and new state leadership lined up, a draft revision to the Constitution. From March the 3rd, CGTN takes you right to the heart of Beijing for a behind-the-scenes look at how 5,000 political representatives and advisors get things done, and how their decisions can have a ripple effect across the world. Join us on CGTN for an insight look into the Two Sessions 2018. The biggest annual political gathering in the world's most populous nation. Some topics to deliberate and discuss, and new state leadership lined up, a draft revision to the Constitution. From March the 3rd, CGTN takes you right to the heart of Beijing for a behind-the-scenes look at how 5,000 political representatives and advisors get things done.
Nominated by Xi Jinping as candidate for Premier of the State Council of the People's Republic of China. Xu Qiliang and Zhang Youxia have been nominated for Vice Chairman of the Central Military Commission, and candidates for members of the Central Military Commission have also been announced. They include Wei Fenghe, Li Zuocheng, Miao Hua, and Zhang Shengming. Zhou Qiang has been nominated for the President of the Supreme People's Court, and Zhang Jun for the Procurator-General of the Supreme People's Procuratorate. Meanwhile, Yang Xiaodu has been elected as the Director of the National Supervisory Commission. One question likely to be asked by many reporters and public is, how do Chinese leaders get elected? Zhou Ying runs us through the process.
As the supreme organ of the state power, the NPC has the authority to elect and appoint China's top leadership. Chinese citizens who have the right to vote, stand for election, and have reached the age of 45 are all eligible for election as the country's president. Normally, one candidate for presidency is nominated by the Presidium of the NPC after consultation among various delegations. And this candidate must gain a majority of votes of all the NPC deputies to be officially elected. The elections of the Vice President, Chairman of the Central Military Commission, President of the Supreme People's Court, and Procurator-General, as well as leaders of the NPC Standing Committee, all follow this same path. And here's what happens next. The President appoints the Premier of the State Council, then the Premier appoints the Vice Premiers, State Councilors, Ministers, and so on. These appointments need to be approved by the NPC as well. The election is conducted via secret ballot. There's also a special secret voting booth for those who want to ensure that the decision process is fully confidential. The secret ballot not only ensures the candid voting by deputies, but also reflects China's enhanced democracy.
And let's take a look at how the candidates for the leadership positions in China are nominated.
The NPC Presidium nominates the candidates for the roles of President and Vice President, Chairman of the Central Military Commission of the PRC, Chairman, Vice Chairman, Secretary-General, and other members of the Standing Committee of the NPC, the Director of the National Supervisory Commission, the President of the Supreme People's Court, and finally, the Procurator-General of the Supreme People's Procuratorate. After discussion, the Presidium makes an official list of candidates based on the votes of NPC deputies. Members of the NPC Standing Committee are nominated from among the NPC deputies. The choice of the Premier of the State Council is decided upon by a presidential nomination. The premier then nominates the vice premiers, state councillors, ministers in charge of ministries or commissions, the Auditor General and the Secretary General of the State Council, and the President of the People's Bank of China. Upon nomination by the chairman of the PRC Central Military Commission, who is currently Xi Jinping, the choice of vice chairman and other members of the commission are decided.
China's constitution is its fundamental set of laws and establishes how the country is organized as well as the powers and authorities of government. A constitutional amendment was adopted at the first session of the 13th National People's Congress, whereby special public officials are now required to pledge allegiance to do it. Let's find out more about this oath.
In July 2015, China's top legislature decided that officials in the country's various governments, courts, and procuratorate should take a public oath of allegiance to the Constitution when they assume office. The decision, which came into effect on the first day of 2016, aims to inspire state functionaries to follow, observe, and safeguard the Constitution. It says they must have constitutional awareness, observe its principles, uphold its spirit, and perform their constitutional obligations. The decision was made official in the constitutional amendment adopted at the first session of the 13th National People's Congress on March the 11th this year.
Since Chinese President Xi Jinping took office in early 2013, 3 new national days have been approved by China's top legislature. They aim to encourage people to reflect more on some of the country's most momentous historical events. Let's take a look. For more insight into China's political season, let's talk to Mr. Victor Gao and Mr. Aina Tangen. So let's start with the latest voting results. Yang Xiaodu has been elected as the director of the National Supervisory Commission. What do you make of this?
I think this is a landmark. This means the new Supervision Commission has been fully established, the new director has been appointed, and the institution is ready for action. And as I mentioned, this will help create greater transparency and certainty and the consistency in China's fight against corruption, and it will boost the confidence of the people for the legitimacy and the continuity and the viability of the party as well as the government for many, many years and decades to come.
What about tasks, specific tasks and priorities for the National Supervisory Commission and its new director?
I think the first task is to continue the fight against individual corrupt persons, including party members and non-party members. Second task is to really come up with institutional checks and balances so that people in positions of power can no longer that easily plunder the public coffer and engage in all acts of corruption. And thirdly, I think we need to create an environment where people's public service will be recognized and rewarded in legitimate ways rather than in illegitimate and corrupt ways. So China will become a much cleaner and more transparent and less corrupt country with all the institutionalized checks and balances going forward.
What's your take, Aina?
Well, I agree with Victor, but it's only half the battle. I mean, as we said earlier, he has a huge issue on his table. It's a new entity. He has to absorb 2 previous entities into it. He has to make a lot of decisions about who's going to be involved at what levels. Just the sheer organization is huge. And he has to go upward. He has to make sure that his communication is very, very clear to the party and that his moves are not being seen as in any way partisan. But it's only half the battle because it's fine to say I want to stamp out corruption, but you really have to build a party that is free from corruption. That means that you on not his responsibility, but the other side of the responsibility, will recreating the party in a way that is attracting people, the very best people, who really truly want to serve their country and the people, as opposed to seeing it as an opportunity for self-enrichment.
We're voting for more. We're waiting for more voting results right now. And talking about the function of the State Council and for the Premier, according to the government work report this year, what do you think would be the toughest tasks for the government?
Well, I think China faces many tasks, and I think if you want me to name one or several top challenges, then I would say how to continue the reform to make sure that the Chinese economic development is more sustainable and is more innovation driven and is more balanced, both in terms of the home market versus the international market, and China's international standing in economic ways can be more improved.
Thank you very much. Let's cross live to the Great Hall of the People.
习近平主席签署了中华人民共和国主席令，现在宣布李克强同志为中华人民共和国国务院总理。
is appointed Premier of the State Council of the People's Republic of China.
Li Keqiang has been approved by MPC, approved as the Premier of the State Council. What's your take?
Congratulations to Premier Li Keqiang. He has done a wonderful job over the past 5 years, and he has won the support and the confidence of the people, as well as all the government officials in the State Council and the ministries.
And now we're looking ahead. Earlier we were talking about future tasks, right?
For the next 5 years, I think there is a lot of things to do. As you mentioned, new challenges, toughest challenges, etc. And
you're saying about economic transformation, right?
Economic transformation, restructuring, and repositioning of the state-owned enterprises in China to make China continuously attractive to foreign companies, so that more foreign companies will feel more at home and more assured that they will have equal access in all measurements to the Chinese market, and also to enable the Chinese private enterprises to be treated equally with the state-owned enterprises in terms of access to market, in terms of access to finance, in terms of access to land and other business opportunities, and also to make sure that China remains a very attractive place for foreign experts to come.
Now let's cross live to the Great Hall of the People.
赞成2960票，反对2票，弃权4票。
960 are for, 2 against, and 4 abstention. Let's have ballot count.
现在宣布
Now I announce that Comrade Xu Qiliang, Comrade Zhang Youxia are appointed Vice Chairpersons of the Central Military Commission of the People's Republic of China.
现在宣布魏凤和。
I announce that Comrade Wei Fenghe, Comrade Li Zuocheng, Comrade Miao Hua, Comrade Zhang Shengmin are appointed members of the Central Military Commission of the People's Republic of China.
Now, Xu Qiliang and Zhang Youxia have been approved as the vice chairpersons of China's Central Military Commission. Also, members of the Central Military Commission have been approved. Tell us more about the Central Military Commission of the People's Republic.
Well, in China, the Central Military Commission actually has two. One is the Central Military Commission of the People's Republic of China, which is a state body, and then, equally importantly, the Central Military Commission of the Communist Party of China, a central committee. And these two entities are actually the same team. They wear two different titles, one belonging to the state, one belonging to the
let's
party.
get more voting results. Thank you very much, Victor.
另选人得票情况：刘源2票。
Now we're expecting more voting results from.
Now announce Comrade Yang Xiaodu is elected Director of the National Supervisory Commission of the People's Republic of China.
Now it's officially announced Yang Xiaodu as the Director of the National Supervisory Commission. As we earlier mentioned, he's the relationship between the National Supervisory Commission and the CCDI, the inspection disciplinary body of the Communist Party of China. Victor, tell us more about this.
Well, going forward, both entities will coexist and they will both exercise their functions. But I would think that their functions will be more and more combined together. Therefore, I think the consistency.
Right.
The same
Thank you very much,
will be
Victor.
more emphasized.
Let's cross live to the Great Hall of the People. We're voting more. We're waiting for more results.
Now I announce that Comrade Zhou Qiang is elected President of the Supreme People's Court of the People's Republic of China.
Zhou Qiang has been elected as the President of the Supreme People's Court. Aina, very briefly, what's your impression on China's reform in its legal and judicial system?
Well, it's been becoming more and more transparent. They've opened up a lot of like intellectual property courts. They removed the power for the death sentence from the provincial areas to the central area. They have been kind of moving slowly towards making sure that the rule of law is there. And
so it's on the way. It's a long campaign, and also take more efforts to come, right? Yep. Now let's cross live again to the Great Hall of the People. We're waiting for more voting results from NPC deputies.
现在宣布，张军同志
I announce that Comrade Zhang Jun is elected Procurator-general of the Supreme People's Procuratorate.
Zhang Jun has been elected as the Procurator-general of the Supreme People's Procuratorate. Tell us more about this department, Victor.
Well, the Procuratorate is more or less the chief prosecutor's office in China. And they are responsible for drafting the indictments and to work very closely with the court system in pushing through the prosecutions of the major cases in China. And in this particular case, in terms of anti-corruption, I think once the National Supervision Commission comes up with its investigation results, they need to refer the case to the prosecutor's office or the procurator's office for legal proceeding against the charged officers.
And talking about the reform of this procurator and its functions, many focus are put onto so-called public interest litigation. Tell us more about this, Aina.
Well, there's this feeling that you cannot just simply go after all the corrupt officials. What you have is a lot of instances where they're like pollution. Where monies are going aside, where public entities are not spending the way it is. These are very important. I mean, the labor issues and things like this. And this is why they're going. I mean, one of the things that Victor referred to earlier was this issue about having companies have private parties. I think this is more for informational purposes, not for control. They're not saying, we want to tell you how you do your business. They're simply saying, look, things are changing, we need to have a very good communications angle, and this will provide that. So these are the kinds of things that they're doing. And the Procuratorate is the Attorney General for China, and their job is to make sure that things are fair. There has to be a mechanism to do this, and this is part of the checks and balances. You have the supervisory things. They gather the information, they put the case together. They're like a kind of a police force, just on the government side. And then it goes to the Attorney General, who has to make the final decision about who and what to charge. And this is then they're also responsible for the civil side, public interest litigation, whether it's pollution or any kind of other social ill like labor problems.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Now let's take a look at voting results so far. The 13th National People's Congress started a 6th plenary meeting of its first session Sunday morning, and deputies has voted on new leaders for national institutions. Li Keqiang has been approved as the Premier of the State Council of the People's Republic of China. Xu Qiliang and Zhang Youxia are now Vice Chairpersons of the Central Military Commission of the People's Republic of China. And talking about members of the Central Military Commission, they are Wei Fenghe, Li Zuocheng, Miao Hua, and Zhang Shengming. Zhou Qiang has been elected as the President of the Supreme People's Court, and Zhang Jun has been elected as the Procurator-General of the Supreme People's Procuratorate. Also, Yang Xiaodu has been elected as the Director of the National Supervisory Commission. So, gentlemen, we're talking about China's legal and judicial reforms, talking about the role of Supreme People's Procuratorate and Procuratorate at different levels. You seem very paying much attention to business operations, and in this year's work report of the Supreme People's Procuratorate, one of the focuses is to provide a better and open and transparent environment for business, both domestic and foreign. What's your readout?
Oh, that's absolutely important. I think China needs to become more transparent in terms of business management, and all branches of the government need to create this environment that caring for business, protecting the legitimate business interests of any party involved is the right thing for China to do, and is a must that China need to do. And in this particular respect, the Procurator's office is absolutely important, because for major cases, you need the Procurator's office involvement in this to bring charges, for example, sometimes to really verify the details of the cases, etc., and to work very closely with the police department, which need to gather the information, gather the evidence, and eventually also with the court system, which really need to adjudicate the case and come up with a sentence for these cases. Whenever you have a business dispute or major business problems in China, rather than thinking about other ways to resolve the dispute, the better way is to go through the judiciary system, to do due process, and to really have an open and a transparent adjudication of the cases. And if everyone involved...
That's fine for civil cases,
yes.
But what we're talking about here is, for instance, the bribery cases involving foreign companies and domestic companies who are involved in medications, and they were selling to the hospitals. Somebody has to step in and do that. The same was the issue with the milk issue. Somebody has to step in and take control of that, and that's where it's happening. But I think a large part of this is protecting the small and medium-sized business entities that the government is relying on to make sure that the economy goes forward. 80% of the jobs are being supplied by these. Now they have to be protected. There's sometimes predatory practices by large players who are trying to push these people out. The financial system is a little bit immature. So when we go back to what Li is facing these days, I mean, there's a tremendous amount on the table. Not only reorganization, but making sure that these policies that balance the system of a centrally planned economy with a market base is kept.
And so what do you make of the utilization of technology in China's court system and its reforms? For example, now China has its very first internet court in the eastern Chinese city of Hangzhou. What's your take on it?
Well, I think it's very important they're moving. I mean, China moved very quickly for IP. There are a number of courts that were taken away from the local jurisdictions to prevent somebody from having undue influence. And they set these up, and they've been very efficient. I mean, much more efficient here than if you were anywhere in the West, where the court system could take tens of years to settle issues just because somebody has enough money to litigate this thing forever. And they've been very things. And the same thing with this internet court. China has said we're going to move to a tertiary service-based economy. To do that, you have to encourage and protect these kinds of things. So while the West is saying, oh, China is not paying enough attention to intellectual property, to new technology, actually they are. And they're moving much more quickly than in many cases the US or Europe.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll be getting back to you. China commits to people-centered development philosophy. Take Shenzhen, for example. That's in a major industrial hub in South China. It has been called the brightest star of China's reform and opening up. In just 4 decades, it's transformed from a poor fishing village to China's Silicon Valley. But what sort of changes has this brought to people living in a bustling city? Our reporter Go Yingfei spoke to 2 generations living there to find out.
This is Nanling, a rich and fully urbanized village located in the southern Chinese tech hub of Shenzhen. 73-year-old Zhang Weiji is one of the most recognized faces in town. He led the village before China's reform and opening up in 1978. Zhang said back then extreme poverty was rife in the village, so much so that many villagers wanted to flee to Hong Kong to make a living.
On the night of May 6, 1979, over 200 villagers tried to escape, including my wife. I jumped on a tractor, rushed to the water, and tried to convince them to stay. But some even said they'd rather die than stay. That really hurt a lot.
It's estimated that over 600,000 people on the Chinese mainland fled to Hong Kong from 1956 to 1980. In 1978, Chinese President Xi Jinping's father, Xi Zhongxun, became secretary of the CPC Provincial Committee in Guangdong. A major task before him was how to stop the exodus.
That was in May when Xi Zhongxun passed by our village. He saw most of the farmland had fallen into disuse, and he felt very sad, and he told us, "This is not your fault. We should take all the blame on ourselves for not improving the people's livelihood." Not long after that, the country announced its reform and opening up policy, and in 1980, the Shenzhen Special Economic Zone was established.
Zhang saw the opportunity and 2 factories were opened in the village. And in just a few years, each villager could earn more than 8,300 yuan annually, an 80-fold increase compared to before.
40 years ago, Nanling is the poorest village in Shenzhen. There were only 500 people living in this village, and most of the young people tried everything they can to flee the village for a better future. But now, look at this. It has convenience stores, it has shopping malls, it has completely changed. Over 80,000 people living and working here.
Now Shenzhen has become one of China's top 4 cities and the country's tech hub. Instead of fleeing, people are flocking in. 26-year-old Lin Li grew up in the city. Last year, she returned from New York to join MakeBlog, a global leading robotics education startup in Shenzhen.
My colleagues here are from all over the country and the world. The average age of the staff here is only around 25 years old. We are young and energetic and dare to dream and act for our future.
Lin's parents came to Shenzhen in the 1980s, and as the second generation of the so-called new Shenzheners, Lin feels it's the special Shenzhen spirit helping her move forward.
Shenzhen is not only my hometown, but also a city for dreamers. Lots of people come here to pursue the Shenzhen speed and strive for their dreams. Entrepreneurship is deep-rooted in the spirit of Shenzhen. I also want to start something of my own in the future.
From Zhang Weiji to Lin Li, from the older locals to the new Shenzheners, it's the people living here who reap the biggest dividends of the city's development. It's also evidence that only placing the interests of people at the heart of reform can generate good development. Ge Yunfei, CGTN, Shenzhen.
China has become a land of opportunity for aspiring professionals, for those in the arts, thanks to reform and a rapid growth in the cultural sector and better protection in intellectual property rights. Our reporter Yang Chengxi meets one young woman who's starting out as a composer and finds out what the landscape is like for those with big dreams.
I started to write my first piano piece when I was around 12, and then I wrote my first orchestra piece for my school orchestra, and it was performed when I was, I think, around 14. It was in 9th grade.
Xu Lingqing has always been musical. She spent most of her student life in the USA, and now she's a full-time composer in Shanghai.
This home studio is the start of Lingqing's music career in China, and she has great aspirations for the future working in this rising industry.
I see a lot of improvement in a lot of the contents that are being produced in China. Really, really excited about seeing more Chinese pieces of original work going, not just going abroad, just going to audiences, for audiences to enjoy.
She did not receive a formal music education. Despite her enthusiasm for music, her parents, both scientists, wanted her to choose the same career path as they.
Yeah, I was actually very frustrated, but at the time I was a very nice daughter.
After graduating from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, she worked as a medical engineer in America and later on as a management consultant in Shanghai. Neither job proved to be fulfilling.
I want to write music, and I think I've always been good at it.
After more than 8 years of working in the corporate world, she made a giant leap in her career path in 2017.
I really think this is a really good industry to get into at this time, because I think in the past few years, and also I think in the future decade, I believe the cultural industry in China will grow a lot. And also it's growing at a much faster pace than in the US and Europe.
The latest government work report from the National People's Congress says that China's cultural sector grew an annual 13% in the past 5 years.
In China and the US, it's becoming more and more similar for where composers are needed. And I think that's a good thing. Because of copyright laws in the US, basically most companies, most people needs to get original compositions. In China nowadays, people also frequently hire composers because people are more aware of the copyright laws in China now, so a lot of businesses, they use original work.
Lingqing hopes she will eventually score for feature films one day.
So a lot of dreams for the future, and hopefully I can find a path to get there.
Yang Chengxi, CGTN, Shanghai.
The central government in recent years has been underscoring its people-centered development philosophy. Among those enjoying unprecedented opportunities are farmers, a driving force in the country's development. Many are being lifted out of poverty through government initiatives, and a growing number are also taking advantage of modern agriculture to increase their incomes. Our reporter Yang Jinghao has the story from southwest China's Sichuan province.
Wang Fang is reaping a bumper harvest of strawberries. In May, the 44-year-old acquired 50 more, or roughly 3 hectares of farmland in home village in the Jinqiao township of Chengdu, to plant the popular fruit.
Some 10 years ago, we relied on traditional labor and intensive agriculture for a living. Since I found little hope for better development, I chose to open a small business in town. Now that modern-style agriculture is bringing more economic benefits, I decided to seek opportunities back home.
Wang said these strawberries, all cultivated in a greenhouse, can bring in about $300,000 annually. During the harvest season, she employs about 60 villagers. Each of them can earn some $475 a month.
It's a lot better than before. Planting crops the old way was laborious, and I could only earn very little. Now I can get a sum of money from the farmland transfer every year and get a job at nearby orchards easily. I can also look after my family. It's really great.
Strawberry farming is just one example of how this township is boosting local development in a way different from traditional agricultural production and with modern technologies. Meanwhile, the cultivation of other crops in neighboring villages is also creating more opportunities for locals. In recent years, Jinqiao has also attracted a growing number of investors from different cities to develop industries suitable for local conditions. Now, the township has grown into a hub for an assortment of fruits, including those from tropical areas. In spring, all kinds of blossoms turn it into a tourist attraction. The local government has encouraged residents to seize the opportunity.
乡村振兴，它必须要所有的老百姓共同富裕，它才能够乡村。
Rural revitalization means all villagers can get rich. How can they get involved in development? Take this peach farm for example. It is owned by an agricultural expert, but local farmers can run related businesses here. In this way, different people can benefit from the same land.
The government has a bigger blueprint. The township has said they're working to develop rural tourism by trying to bring in more talent. Local farmers will also be involved. Strawberry farming remains a big challenge for Wang Fang, but she's confident about an expansion in the near future. She also hopes more villagers could join her in tapping the potential of their hometown, and says she'd love to share her experience and knowledge with them. Yang Jinghao, CGTN, Sichuan Province.
Now let's get more insight into this gentleman people-centered development philosophy. As General Secretary Xi Jinping pointed out at the 19th CPC National Congress last October, the main contradiction in China nowadays is people's pursuit for better lives and imbalance and insufficient development. So under this context, how will this philosophy, or more specific strategy, to play out in the near future?
I would say that the people's desires and their requests follow a path. They need to satisfy the most primary needs, like keep people from hunger, from catching up with cold, for example. But gradually, we have many other things to desire. Better school for the kids, for example, better health care, better travel arrangements, better pensions, career prospect, more balanced development, better environment, etc. So I think it's always coming up, and the government need to be adaptable to the changing needs of the people and always focus on satisfying the legitimate needs of the people, and in a gradual way to make sure that the delivery of the services can catch up with the changing requirements and the desires of the people.
Talking about this gradual way you just described, step by step, I think that means. So what do you make of the upcoming policies? What could be the next step?
Well, let's use health as an example. As part of the government restructuring, the Ministry of Health is renamed into Ministry of Health for the public, as well as Ministry of Health for the individual citizens. So I think in this way, the future development of the Ministry of Health need to really cater not only to, let's say, hospitals, drugs industry, etc.
Actually, it's commission nowadays. That means it has more functions and need to coordinate more subsidiary bodies, right?
Absolutely. They also need to care about how to deliver the medical services directly to the people, regardless of wherever they are. Right now, there is a tendency, whenever you become ill, you want to rush to the best hospital. In China, normally the largest hospital for medical care. In more developed countries, you just rush up to the street corner clinic, which knows you better. You have your family doctor over there who can refer you to all kinds of clinics, for example. That, I think, is a better system, but China is not there yet. We need to reform the public health system and also care for health of individual citizens so that we can catch up in this particular area with more developed countries.
And this is also very crucial, what you just mentioned, because naturally people want the best of the best for themselves, but you need to look at the realistic conditions around you. For example, health is a good example of this. People rush to the best hospital in the country, and several hospitals are always flooded with patients from all around the country. But at the same time, local level institutions urgently needs more practice and more budget, and they need to survive and prosper, right, Anna?
Yes, they do, and the question how you do it. But I mean, healthcare is very important, but I look at two other issues. One is poverty, and this is addressing the past. How do you deal with this last stubborn 30 million who you need to bring to a civilized level where the society goes over full? The second is education. I mean, a lot of things that we're talking about here, if you want entrepreneurship, if you want better healthcare things, this is going to take a major change in education, and the government has committed to this. Now we have to see how that's going to roll out. There's been more emphasis on technical training. It's not everybody doesn't have to go to college to be a productive member of society. You need to figure out a way in which you can be helpful, but also earn a good living. So at these points, there's got to be an education process about education. It's like when Chinese students go abroad, they only care about how high the ranking is of the school, never whether it's an appropriate place for their child in terms of the actual educational curriculum and how they handle things.
And do you think, so you're saying that this is also a structural problem?
Yes, it is. I mean, China has grown so quickly. And you know the needs that are not being done. You know the story about the farmer who's raising strawberries and things like that. She was able to connect, all right, a growing need in a middle class society. People want to have fruits year round, and if you can provide them, you can make a good living. And she's a kind of a template that people should be looking at, and not just say, oh, I'm going to go sell strawberries, but say, okay, how should I be thinking about the society I'm in? If you're going to grow a consumption economy, you need people to start thinking, but they need basic skills. You need to know a little bit of accounting, shipping, understanding regulations, banking, and the government has to provide it. I mean, the big banks are very good with big clients, but they've been less able to handle the 80% of small and medium-sized the small and medium-sized enterprises that create 80% of the jobs. And they need to do a better job. There's some hope from online banking. The government has embarked on an ambitious plan to, as with other things, it's an initial program. They've been granting licenses to internet companies like Alibaba and WeChat, Ant Financial and WeBank, to allow them to address these needs in more efficient ways. For example, it only costs them 3 kwai to vet a client, and they can tell you whether you're going to get the loan within seconds, versus maybe 6 weeks and 1,000 kwai to do the exact same thing if you're at a traditional bank. So these are the types of things that people have, and it's the kind of thinking that they need. How do you connect into the value stream of what is coming?
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll be getting back to you. Now let's take a look at Li Keqiang's profile. Li Keqiang was born in July 1955. He earned a bachelor's degree in law from Peking University in 1982 and later a doctorate in its School of Economics. Li is currently a member of the Standing Committee of the Political Bureau of the CPC Central Committee. He's also Premier of the State Council and the Secretary of its leading party members group. From 1982 to 1998, he worked mainly with the Communist Youth League of China, growing from the position of Secretary of the Peking University's Committee to become First Secretary of the Central Committee Secretariat of the CYL. In 1998, he became Deputy Secretary of the CPC Henan Provincial Committee, and a year later, the Provincial Governor. In 2002, he was promoted into the role of Secretary of the CPC Henan Provincial Committee. 2 years later, in 2004, he moved to the northeast to assume the position of Secretary of the CPC Liaoning Provincial Committee. Li has been a member of the Standing Committee of the Political Bureau of the CPC Central Committee since 2007. After 5 years serving as Vice Premier of the State Council, Li Keqiang became Premier in 2013. Now let's continue our discussion, gentlemen. We just look at the profile of Premier Li Keqiang. Looking ahead to the central government's work, we were talking about people-centered development philosophy. How would this embody in new policies to come, Victor?
Well, definitely, as we're just now talking about, improving education, healthcare,
poverty alleviation.
Poverty
right?
alleviation, environment.
Yeah. From what Ina just said, for poverty alleviation, it looks like a joint effort both by the government and the people, both from the public sector and the private sector. Is that correct, Ina?
Yeah, it is, because you cannot solve this. I mean, the government, unless they're just going to give out subsidies, they can't solve it by themselves. You have to plug these people into a viable, sustainable situation. And in some cases, that means making the hard decision to relocate them. If people are in an area where the farmland can't produce and there's no industry and it doesn't make sense to run road, rails, utilities out to a remote village that's never going to have real opportunity, then you have to do the hard choice and say, look, we're going to move you to a place where your children and your grandchildren have a future. So these are the things that they're doing. I mean, it's a very exhaustive. I mean, they make a file on every individual. They make a file on the family. They make a file on the village, because they're really looking at the complete solution. This is very, very unusual. I mean, the UN has come in and they studied this and they think it's very exhaustive. This is the kind of thing that creates real change. And this is a good example of how China is a little bit different. In the US, we declare war on poverty every 10 years, and 10 years later we declare another war on poverty because that one wasn't won. Here, they're actually doing the fine grade planning that's necessary to actually achieve it.
What's your take, Victor, talking about this?
Eliminating poverty in a comprehensive manner in China is a huge task. And in any society, there will be people who are richer, there are people who are poorer for whatever reasons. However, as a society with decency, we cannot allow the existence of poverty impacting on groups of people. If it involves groups of people, then it's not just problems with the individuals. It probably is a problem with other aspects.
It's all about the big picture, right? China is aimed to build a moderately prosperous society very soon.
A one-party system. There's nowhere to hide. If there is a problem in society,
take the responsibility and you get things done.
Yeah, you don't have a choice. If you don't, you lose the
And talking about poverty alleviation, it's more about targeted and precision nowadays, right? That means you need to get things done, both statistically and administratively.
Absolutely. And also for those areas which still have groups of people who live for many years in poverty, then the government need to come into action, because we need to take out all those problems existing which make people poor, which make people locked up in poverty, by creating jobs, by improving infrastructure, by providing
skills,
delivery,
training,
and skills and training, vocational training, etc. So this is the key.
But Victor, be clear here. It's not that easy as simply doing it. In some cases, these people are disabled. They have mental issues and things like that.
And you need to think about geographical conditions, right?
Exactly. That's what we were talking about, relocation. You know, what is necessary to sustain these people. But the point is that you're looking at each level. Individuals, families, villages, and areas. What is necessary to make this happen? And in some cases, yes, the government has said, look, we're going to subsidize these people because we're not going to throw them on the dust heap of history. This is not who we are. We cannot afford to do that. If we do that, we have failed in our obligation as government. This is something that can happen in Western states because people can battle back and forth as to who's to blame for poverty. But in China, there is no escape.
And it also needs to be realistic, right, both for the government and the people. Just as President Xi Jinping mentioned, as we heard earlier, you need to make your target and your goal realistic. Don't aim too high.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, you're just chasing the wind, right?
Absolutely. When Anna mentioned that handicapped people, that's a completely separate category. I think society at large need to provide whatever help needed to help the handicapped people or disabled people. Now, if we are talking about able-bodied people locked up in poverty, then I think not just giving out subsidies will be the most important. Helping them to create a job, find a job, create a better educational system for them is the key. To teach them how to fish rather than providing fish to them is the key. And I think President Xi Jinping, in one of the meetings with the provincial government, provincial delegation, said the right thing. We need to keep the expectation reasonable. You cannot create too much of an expectation and then let the people down again by not fulfilling the promises. the promises need to be reasonable, and you need to deliver once a promise is made to people still locked up in poverty. And I think China is doing the greatest job in poverty alleviation. For the last 40 years, China has liberated more people out of poverty than the total combined number of people lifted out of poverty since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution.
Thank you very much. Aina, let's cross live to the Great Hall of the People and get latest from the ongoing session of the National People's Congress. Now we're watching live footage from Great Hall of the People.
Appointed or elected as a member of the 13th NPC Standing Committee.
Dear deputies, the agenda for this morning's plenary session is completed. After the plenary session, the Presidium will make public the appointment decisions and all the election results. Now, according to the rules of oath of allegiance to the Constitution for the first session of the 13th National People's Congress, now let's proceed to the ceremony of taking oath of allegiance to the Constitution. Now we will proceed to the ceremony of taking oath of allegiance to the Constitution for the first session of the 13th National People's Congress. Please all rise. For the national anthem of the People's Republic of China. Please be seated. Now, Comrade Li Keqiang, Premier of the State Council of the People's Republic of China, will take the oath of allegiance to the Constitution. I do swear that I will bear true allegiance to the Constitution of the People's Republic of China and will defend the authority of the Constitution, execute my functions as required by law, be loyal to the country and the people, uphold integrity in discharging my duties, accept people's supervision, and work to the best of my ability for a great modern socialist country that is prosperous, strong, democratic, culturally advanced, harmonious, and beautiful. Li Keqiang.
Now,
Comrade Xi Qiliang, Comrade Zhang Youxia, Vice Chairperson of the Central Military Commission, Comrade Wei Fenghe, Comrade Li Zuocheng, Comrade Miao Hua, Comrade Zhang Shenling, members of the Central Military Commission, will take the oath of allegiance to the Constitution.
请宣誓。我宣誓。
I do swear that I will bear true allegiance to the Constitution of the People's Republic of China and will defend the authority of the Constitution, execute my functions as required by law, be loyal to the country, be loyal to the people, uphold integrity in discharging my duties, accept people's supervision, and work to the best of my ability for a great modern socialist country that is prosperous, strong, democratic, culturally advanced, harmonious, and beautiful.
宣誓人，你呢？ 现在请中华人民共和国国家监察委员会主任
Director of the National Supervisory Commission of the People's Republic of China, Comrade Yang Xiaodu, will take his oath.
请宣誓。我宣誓。
I do swear that I will bear true allegiance to the Constitution of the People's Republic of China, defend its authority, execute my functions as required by law, be loyal to the country and the people, uphold integrity in discharging my duties, accept the people's supervision, and work to the best of my ability for a great modern socialist country that is prosperous, strong, democratic, culturally advanced, harmonious, and beautiful.
现在请中华人民共和国最高人民法院院
Next,
长
Chief Justice
周
of the
强
Supreme
宣
People's
誓。
Court, Comrade Zhou Qiang, will take his oath.
请宣誓。
我宣誓。
I do swear that I will bear true allegiance to the Constitution of the People's Republic of China, defend its authority, execute my functions as required by law, be loyal to the country and the people, uphold integrity in discharging duties, accept the people's supervision, and work to the best of my ability for a great modern socialist country that is prosperous, strong, democratic, culturally advanced, harmonious, and beautiful.
请 现在请中华人民共和国最高人民检察院检察长
Procurator-general of
张军宣
Supreme
誓。
People's Procuratorate will take his oath.
请宣誓。
我宣誓
I do swear
忠于
that
中
I will
华
bear
人民
true
共和国
allegiance to the
宪法
Constitution of the
维
People's
护
Republic
宪
of
法
China
权威
and will defend the
履
authority
行
of the
法定职
Constitution,
责
execute my functions as required by law, be loyal to the country and the people, uphold integrity in discharging my duties, accept the people's supervision, and work to the best of my ability for a great modern socialist country that is prosperous, strong, democratic, culturally advanced, harmonious, and beautiful.
宣誓人张军。
As was an oath-taking ceremony taken by the elected state leaders on Sunday morning, a very solemn ceremony indeed. For more insight, let's talk to our studio guest. What do we make of this ceremony? What's the significance of setting up this ceremony at a state level for the very first time, Victor?
I think these constitutional swearing-in ceremony is important both as symbols and important as substance. Symbolically speaking, this is the first time that the top, highest ranking Chinese officials are taking part in these constitutional swearing ceremony ever in history. And so it's very symbolic. Everyone watches this and is impressed by the way it is done. Substantively, I think it's equally, if not even more important. That is, it elevates the importance of the Chinese constitution to the highest level of importance in China. And all these high-ranking officials need to swear allegiance to the constitution, defend the constitution, and swear to be obligated by what they swear to serve. For example, to serve in a clean way, to strive hard to work for the Chinese causes. And I think both substantively and symbolically, it's very impressive. It's done by a lot of pomp and ceremonies, for example, lots of bells and whistles. But the substantive implication stands out as the lasting testimony to these high-ranking officials to rededicate themselves and recommit themselves to the ultimate noble cause they are serving.
What's your take, Aina?
Well, I think the optics are much better than just having somebody get up there and stand up and basically bow. I mean, it really adds, and I agree with Victor, there's important substance to this as well. When all the leaders are doing this, it really says, okay, this is not about achieving a position, it's about your function within this particular government. So I think it plays along very well with how the government sees the reorganization, recasting how government works, where and who's involved in it. Very important.
And Chinese President Xi Jinping has been emphasizing the importance of the constitution and also the importance of building the rule of law in China. Tell us more about these two.
Well, I mean, the Constitution is the base. I mean, you have laws that are promulgated by a legislature. In this particular case, the Constitution is a living Constitution. You know, people watching in the U.S. or other places that have written constitutions, which are very difficult to change, it's a very different situation. China has a much more flexible things, but it's the basis of society. So for them, it's take it very seriously. Having people say this is the base of society, that we will abide by it. This is the bedrock of what creates the rule of law. When all of these guys are up there making swearing that they will uphold the Constitution, this is a strong symbol that it's not simply a free-for-all, that this is something which is very important. There's a higher power than them. In the US, they would use Bibles and things like this. In China, they use the Constitution. This is the highest authority, all right? The one thing that they can all point to and say we serve.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. And China's political season inspires a lot of discussion around the country. So how do young people see the major issues being debated at the two sessions? For more on that, let's cross live to our reporter Yang Chengxi in Shanghai. Hello, Chengxi.
Hi, Pandeng. Now, we are more than 2 weeks into this marathon of a political event, and we find many interesting topics worth discussing for our panel of young professionals here in the Shanghai studio. Now, joining us today is Nancy, who is a digital marketing and e-commerce professional. There's also Mr. Zhang Yunxiang, a student of political science in Fudan University. And we've got Abby Chen, who is a public relations professional here in Shanghai. And you moved to work in the Chinese mainland from the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. So we are hoping that you can provide some unique perspective to our discussion here. And also joining us remotely through video chat is Mr. Wang Hongcheng, who works in the video game industry. And last but not least, Ms. Dong Jiaqi, a student at New York University Shanghai campus. Now, guys, thank you very much for joining our discussion today. Let's just get into it. Now, the first topic, housing, which is a very popular topic for Chinese, and the government has vowed to maintain control over the market. Now, it is a very popular notion in China that we should get our first apartment as early as possible in our lives. And many young people today are using their parents' money to pay for mortgage down payments. And do you think that is normal?
I think it's really a whole family investment decision, like whether or not or when you should own like house or apartment, this heavy fixed asset. But if it does not affect your current living standard, it's actually good to own as soon as possible. As Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, the house price will remain high as more people rush in for work. As my experience, even my classmates in New York, London, and Paris, they have to depend on their parents for the down payment. For me, I think it's a good thing to teach young people to train the habit of save money and make longer financial plans. So I won't buy so many bags or clothes in like before if I had this.
So you do believe that
yes.
should be normal. But Abby, what do you think? Because I think Hong Kong is one of the most important or expensive city to live in right now. So what are your takes on this?
So a lot of my, first of all, I think if you have the resources, I think property is a very important investment asset that we should acquire as early as possible. However, whether or not it's normal to rely on parents for a down payment, I don't think it's a question of being normal. Is that if I think young generations, if they have another more reasonable alternatives, for example, mortgages, or if they have their own, if they save fast enough, I think most of the people, they would rather not ask their parents for down payments. And in terms of Hong Kong, a lot of my friends, of course, we talked about, they won't, a lot of them can't afford down payments. A lot of them are still renting an apartment. So that's a very, I would say, serious issues that we need to think about for the next generation.
Yeah, but the fact that many young people are using their parents' money sort of reflects that most young people can't really afford an apartment at this time in life. So you're in your 20s. Did your parents give you any pressure as to whether you should buy an apartment early in your life?
Actually, I think it's not a problem of pressure given by our parents. It's a pressure given by the increasing house price. So maybe as the house price is still increasing, buying our own house or property is still the best choice for us. Actually, do we have alternatives to rent house? I think renting house is entirely different from possessing the property. For example, when I was in the US, I also rent house from leasing office, but I can continue the contract as long as I wish. But in China, many of my friends, they have to move their home frequently due to various reasons given by the house owner. So renting house in China adds to the uncertainty of our life. That's why I think many young people prefer to buy our property rather than rent a house.
Mm-hmm. But Hongcheng, what do you think? You're also millennial. You're in your 20s. So renting or buying, do you have immediate plans? in the future?
For now, I will rent a house in Shanghai, but my parents didn't really give me a lot of pressure on buying a house. I mean, like, they talk to me like, hey, we have money, we can buy a house for you. So you don't really have that kind of pressure, but it doesn't really happen to most of the people that I know in my age. Like just last week, one of my close friends bought a house, started complaining about me about all the debt I'm gonna pay every month and everything. So I think it's really essential about this house thing in traditional Chinese family, and you just can't really get over it. And I think for the time being, I don't think it will ever change like that.
But Jiaqi, do you think that this, let's say a Chinese thing, a Chinese value, do you think that it will shift in the future?
I think my parents are a little bit different. They say it's acceptable that young people to rent an apartment for marriage, because my parents say they hope my personal development not to be restricted by the issue. They hope me to be more independent in personal financing and explore more opportunities in China and over the world. So purchasing a house means to settle down. This is not an urgent issue for me right now.
So many of you have overseas experience, and you've got a lot of friends from many parts of the world. So maybe a comparison between the values and thinking between Chinese youngsters and global youngsters from other countries. So what are your observations on this?
I think talking about the housing and the marriage, right now I think still a very high percentage of Chinese people think before you get married, like either guys or girls side, you have to have a house first. That's the main reason why a lot of people have this basic need that they need to buy the house. But for Westerners, they think if you two people love each other, you don't have to have a house, car, you can still be together. I think it's quite different.
Exactly. Actually, the traditional Chinese opinion thinks that family or house almost equal to stable and certain. But in Western countries, like in US, many young people move from place to places for their shift of work, or even if they just quit from their work jobs and go to vacations and holiday for years long. So that is quite different opinions and the side of thinking about our lives and our plans about the understanding about life quality and our personal plans. Yeah.
So I guess many of us would agree that the values are being more progressive right now for younger people in this area. So do you think that in the future it might change even how strong the demand is for housing in first-tier cities?
We are wondered because my mom kept talking that maybe the taxation for the house gonna come. So for certain people which they buy house for investment, they will try to sell certain house. So and certain cities probably, we hope the house price can go down a little bit. So like we can afford.
My perspective is that I think house pricing will always go up. So it's a matter of if you need it, if you need to think about if it fits in your development plan. Everyone is different. I don't think there's a necessary has to go with the trend that we have to buy a property.
Thank you. Yeah. Now let's move on to the second topic. Now President Xi Jinping has famously said that we want green hills and clean water just as much as mountains of gold and silver. But at the same time, we're seeing the USA pulling out of the Paris Agreement, saying that it puts the US at an economic disadvantage. So it calls into question once again, can economic growth, rapid economic growth, go really hand in hand with environmental protection? Jiaqi, what's your take on this?
I think to alleviate the negative impact on the environment, the government could encourage sustainable business to balance the environment and economic growth. Business can profit while they benefiting the society and protecting the environment. I think many worldwide researchers have shown that strategic plans in sustainability can drive companies' performance, for example, efficiency of operation and corporate innovation. And also it's helpful to building consumer loyalty. For example, I think last Double 11, many online shopping platforms has started to recycle the cardboard and packaging. As a consumer, I think I will choose more green products and join such consumer loyalty programs.
Thank you. Now, Yunxiang, you are a student of political science, so she talked about a solution from the private sector, but from the public sector perspective, in what way can really a government achieve that at the same time?
Actually, in my opinion, economic growth and environment protection is both parts of the public value. So I don't think they are naturally contradictory with each other. For example, economic growth can bring more materials and resources for environment protection. And also in the meantime, environment protection can create jobs in green industries. So what's important for public sector is to understand the major contradiction in our society and to understand the majority people's desire currently. So promoting the green industries and technical innovation can bring opportunities to solve this tension between these two aims.
But are we seeing some concrete, real-life examples of this green development, though? Can anyone give some example of things you have observed that have progressed in this area?
I think right now in China, for a lot of part of the areas, the first and the second industry for the materials, it already developed quite well. Now we are more developing the third industry. For example, China is definitely leader for e-commerce, digital, and also the second is also we develop more the travel, design, art. So this area actually are the booming ones and doesn't really pollute the earth that much as before. So I think we have made quite progress recently.
I think in terms of multinational companies, a lot of companies, they see that the mega trends, for example, urbanization, the increasing populations, these are the trends that they can develop in sustainable solutions to solve China's problem. So I think a lot of them embed these sustainable solutions into the business strategy. So we've seen, I personally, I have worked with many companies that I've seen them from, for example, production, raw material to end product, customer service. They've been trying to, doing very well to input this sustainable solution into the society and their business as well.
Thank you guys very much for providing your valuable opinions on these two subjects, and that's all the time we have. Now, Pandeng, we hope that our discussion here represents the voice of a younger generation, and we can be a helpful addition to your discussions in the Beijing studio. Back to you.
Very enlightening indeed. Thank you very much, our reporter Yang Chengxi in Shanghai. So let's talk about this gentleman, young people in Shanghai. Some young people in Shanghai have spoken out. I'm not quite sure if they're all from Shanghai, but they certainly represent a fraction of the young people there. And they talk about a career, personal financing, housing, all realistic topics. And that's good, I think. You know, everyone should build a good life for him or her herself. Let's start with housing. It seems there is a sentiment that it's very difficult to get a property right now in China. True or false, Victor?
True, especially major cities, in Shanghai in particular.
But China is such a vast country. You cannot always focus on Beijing and Shanghai, two cities,
but
right?
if you are stuck in Shanghai for whatever reason and you need to have a place to stay, then you only care about housing in Shanghai. You do not care about housing 5,000 kilometers away, for example, in one of the border towns. And of course, housing is very local. In major cities, housing price is astronomical. Most people cannot afford that, especially in the younger generation. This is a problem, and I think the society at large really need to figure out a better way to deal with that. Sometimes local governments actually prefer their local property price goes up because they can expect to sell land for more revenue.
That's no longer the case, right? Because it's past tense right now.
Yes and no, because to have a booming market is, generally speaking, considered a good thing for the local government. But whether in the longer term the local city will come to suffer from the consequences, that's another thing, because too high a pricing price will make it less vibrant as an economy. Less people need to could afford to come in, for example. So you need to really come up with a more balanced plan. If we look at Shanghai versus Chongqing, for example, Chongqing city deliberately choose property policy which encourages more people to move in, and the property price has been more or less more reasonable, whereas Shanghai property price is really skyrocketing, and it's way beyond the affordability for the younger generation of the people. And by listening carefully to the three young persons to talk about housing situation, I think I also get worried. They need to borrow money from all their relatives, for example, to pay the down payment and eventually to buy the property. And I hope they will earn more money and housing price will be more reasonable, and more younger people in their generation can be more optimistic about the prospect that eventually they will have a good housing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Victor Gao Zhikai and Mr. Aina Tangen there. And that's it for this special live coverage on CGTN on China's political season. I'm Pan Deng in Beijing. Bye-bye.